Hey there, it's Vicki Howell here to show you all of the key components that you'll need to know to crochet a sock. Like this one, this is a self-striping little number called Footsie, and it is worked from the toe to the cuff with an afterthought heel. So I'm going to show you how to set it for the toe. We're going to talk about the ribbing for the foot. We're going to talk about prepping for the afterthought heel. We'll just talk about just resuming ribbing for the cuff, and then back to actually completing the afterthought heel. So let's get started. All right, let's talk toe. So this sock is worked, as I said, from the toe up, and we're going to start right here at the center and then work outward to create what will ultimately look like sort of a, I don't know, like a pyramid almost. All right, so to get started, you are going to, regardless of what size you're making, you're going to start by chaining 9. Okay, now we have our chain 9, and we're going to be working on, we're going to be creating an oval shape. So we'll work on both the top and the bottom of this chain. So I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to single crochet in the second chain from the hook. Move this out of the way so you get a better view. Okay, so we never count the loop that is on the actual hook. So 1, 2 is right there. It's a little bit smaller of a gauge, so it might be a little harder to see, so you can always pinch and zoom depending on what you're watching on. So we'll insert the hook, and I'm using American terms. Create our single crochet. All right, so now that we've done that, we are going to single crochet in the next 6 chains. And by the way, if you're working with a sock yarn like this unique sock, and you notice that you don't have your hook and all of the plies, just take care to remedy that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and work those 6 single crochets. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here. Okay, so we've worked our 6 single crochets, and you're going to have a little piece that kind of looks like a hot curly mess. You're on the right track, I promise. Okay, so now you're going to only have 1 chain left, and you need to work 2 single crochets in that same chain. So this is going to act as one of your ends of this oval that we talked about. And sometimes working the last chain is a little fussy. So working 2 single crochets in that last chain. All right, so from here, we are going to rotate the piece, and now we're going to be working on the underside. So we started working on the top, we're rotating it 180 degrees, and then we're going to work on the underside. So what we want to do is we want to single crochet in the next 7 of the chains. So not the one that we just worked 2 in, that was the end. So we're going to go to the next one, and you will see that it's just a little leg of a loop that you're working in. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now we've worked 7 single crochets on the underside of our beginning chain. And so we want to join our round because that last chain is also sharing a space with our beginning. So we're going to join our round with a slip stitch. Okay, so now you can see you have this little oval, and that is the very, let me pull this in, tippy of your toe. Okay, so next up, we are going to chain 1. This does not count as a stitch. This yarn is a fine enough gauge that generally you would not count a chain 1 as a stitch. And so we need to work 2 single crochets into that end stitch, that first stitch. So 1, 2, and then we want to work a single crochet in the next 6 stitches. So all the way along the edge, essentially. Okay, so now we've worked 6 single crochet and we are at our end stitches. Now remember, in our first round we created 2 stitches in one end, so that gives us essentially two spaces in our end to work in now. So we're working an increase essentially. So that means we're going to work 2 single crochets in the next 2 stitches. So 2 single crochets twice. So our next stitch is here. We work 1, I'm going to do that again. I got my my hook caught. We're going to work 1 and then a second one. And then we need to go to the next stitch. And if you're not sure where that is, you can always do a little tug. And if the loop moves, you know you've already worked into it. So we go to the next stitch and we're working under both loops of the stitch at this point. And we're going to work 2 single crochets again. Okay, and then as the pattern calls for, and again, this is for all sizes of our sock, you're going to just work straight on the underside, but still going through both loops, or now going through both loops of the stitch because we're not working on the underside of a chain anymore. Until you get to the opposite end. And if you'll remember, when we started this round, you started with 2 single crochets in that beginning stitch. So we need to mirror the opposite end. So because we worked 2 stitches in two single crochets in 2 stitches, we need to mirror that look by ending this round with 2 single crochets in the last stitch. And when you've got silky smooth yarn, it's really common for your hook just to slide off, so just be mindful. And then you'll join the round. And that is your setup. So you'll just continue in that manner as your pattern calls for or gets you to get you to the stitch count for your foot. So that part will vary. How often you work these rows, repeat, will vary on what size sock you're making. But that is the general recipe for this particular setup. You will work 2 single crochets twice on either end, which is increasing every round, and then work straight on either side. And you'll just keep going. And when you are done, your piece will look a little like this. All right, next up, let's talk foot.
Okay, so the foot of this sock is worked with a regular half double crochet bottom of the foot, and then the top of the foot has a 1x3, or excuse me, a 1x2 rib. So what that is, consists of, for the purposes of this particular pattern, is a front post double crochet and 2 half double crochets. So what that looks like is you're going to do a double crochet, but instead of going into the top of the stitch, you're going to go around the front stitch, or the front of the post rather. Yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through 2 loops twice, just like you normally would for a double crochet. So that is the portion of the rib that is more forward facing. And then we're just going to do 2 half double crochets. So yarn over, insert in the regular manner, so through the top loops, yarn over, pull through 3, and then you'll do that one more time. Yarn over, pull through, you've got 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through all 3. And that's your repeat. So you just keep doing that until your foot is as long as you need it to be from the tip of your toe to where your ankle starts. That is the ribbing on the top. Okay, now we've finished all of our sock except for our heel. So it's time to go ahead and do our afterthought heel. All right, so what you want to do is you want to join your yarn, taking your, sorry, I stepped away for a second, taking your hook at a joining spot that is just to the left of what will be a gap. And I'll talk about that in a second. So we're going to insert our hook underneath both loops of the stitch and draw our yarn through. And then we're going to be working this heel in single crochet, so I'm just going to chain 1. That's the height of a single crochet. This chain 1 will not count as a stitch throughout this heel. It's just too small, frankly, to deal with, so it's really just to get you where you need to go. So you're going to go ahead and single crochet into the same place where you just put that chain. And then you're going to single crochet all the way to the gap. So in the pattern, it'll tell you how many stitches that will be based on the size that you're working. But you're just working all the way over to that point. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that you will need 2 removable stitch markers or safety pins. These type will work. These type will also work. Just something that you can remove. All right, we're going to work all the way over to the gap. Okay, so now we've gotten to our first gap, stitch right before our first gap, and we want to add a couple stitches in that gap. So just kind of do it wherever it makes sense. It may be into a side post, it's fine. Fake it till you make it. Okay, so you're going to do 2 stitches, create 2 single crochets there, and then in that second single crochet you want to place a marker. Let me try that again. So in your second single crochet that you created, you want to place a marker. And then we want to work our single crochets to the next gap. So go ahead and do that. Okay, now we've worked to our second gap, and so we want to mirror what we did on the opposite side by single crocheting twice into that gap. And then once again, placing a stitch marker on the that second stitch that you just created. Okay, at this point, you're probably going to be, or you're definitely going to be at the end of your round. So you just want to join in a slip stitch. If you realize that you started maybe 1 stitch over, you can add a stitch, it doesn't really matter. Just as long as you get the stitch count that the pattern calls for and making sure that you have the same amount on top and bottom of this. Okay, once we have done all of our decreases and our heel is the depth that we want it to be, or you've just followed the pattern, we are ready to fasten off and finish. So you can go ahead and remove the markers if you didn't already do that on your last decrease round. And then snip your yarn, make sure that you leave a tail that is long enough to seam with. And then fasten off as you normally would, just thread that through the loop. Okay, from here you're going to need a tapestry needle. And you just want to thread your tail through. And now all we're going to do is seam the opening of your heel, it looks like little lips, I guess, together. You can kind of do whatever. You could also single crochet this together if you wanted. I just like a less bulky seam on a heel, but you could absolutely do it that way if that's what you wanted to do. But what I'm going to do is essentially mattress stitch, and I'm going to go under both loops of 1 stitch with my needle on one side. And then I'll do the exact same thing on the opposite side. And pull it together. And now we're just going to alternate that until we've gotten all of our stitches closed. So on this side, one side, my bottom, cinch it. The opposite side, going under both loops of the stitch, cinch it. So go ahead and continue that until you've closed all of your space, and I'll meet you right back here. Okay, once you've closed off your whole opening for your heel, you want to poke your needle through. I got overzealous and I did it already. Poke your needle through with the tail, and then you want to weave in the tail the way that you would weave in ends for anything. And that is that. Now, like with all projects, socks included, I highly recommend blocking these. It will help some of the, for lack of a better term, pointiness that can happen with an Afterthought heel. It'll kind of smooth that out. So other than weaving in this one last end at the top, we have finished socks, my friend. Well done. All right, if you have any questions, be sure to just post in the comment section or email support@yarnyay.com, and we will do our best to help you out. All right, bye.